everyone can hear. So let me just give a brief introduction, and then you can go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello everyone, welcome to our session. I'm going to give the floor first to Professor Shankar Krishnan, who is the past president of IFMBE, International Federation of Medical and Biological Engineers, and he's also an acting member of the committee of IFMBE and chair of the IFMBE Federation for Germany.
I don't know why it's taking more time. Yeah. Restart. Yeah, it was there just a minute ago. Is that from your computer? It looked like it wrote it.
It's from Zoom. It shows it's loading.
Well, in that case, you know, I can just talk and then. Now it will load.
Is there now?
Yeah. Okay, we can see.
Yeah.
I hope all the participants can see this.
Yeah.
They can. Excellent. Well, once again, I'm delighted to chair this exciting session. I'm Professor Shankar Krishnan. I'm based in Boston. I am the immediate past president of the International Federation for Medical and Biological Engineering. I heard that Professor Nicholas Polykarakis gave a plenary speech and talked about IFMBE. We have over 70 national and transnational societies. Our members are biomedical engineering societies, and the societies have members. So our members directly are the societies. Transnational meaning in multiple countries or multiple nations. An example would be IEEE, for example. You know, so IEEE Engineering and Medicine Parallel Society is a member of our society. We have 5 regions. We have Asia Pacific region, Europe. You are part of the European region. Then we have Africa. We have Latin America, and we have North America. Okay, so these are the 5 regions within IFMBE. We also hold several conferences in the region. There are also national conferences sponsored or co-sponsored by IFMBE. Let's go to the next slide, please. The purpose of this event and this exciting conference is that we like to promote our journal. Our official journal is called the Journal of Medical and Biological Engineering and Computing, or the Journal for short. And we like to have the participants get to know more about our journal. And also, we are delighted that we have Deputy Editor, Professor Dragomir Vidal, who will give an overview of the journal, and at the same time, he will also go into how to write a scientific paper. So it used to be a slogan, publish or perish. So publication is important for students in the master's level, PhD level, postdoctoral students, junior faculty, lecturers, assistant professors, associate and full professors, and then even after a few years, it's by publication that you disseminate the knowledge that is gained by such efforts. And it is considered very essential for a professional in the biomedical engineering field to publish. And we believe, our journal is a fantastic journal in the biomedical engineering field. It has got a very wide spectrum. We are delighted that Professor Shanlok Tom, who is our editor-in-chief, has been associated with the journal for several years. He is a professor presently at Shanghai Jiangnan University, and in the areas of research interest of neural engineering, neural signal processing, neuroimaging, and neuromodulation. Okay. And Professor Tom has got a big team of deputy and associate editors. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we are really delighted that we have Professor Andrei Dragomir, who can speak much better Romanian than me. I can only say 2 words. So it's interesting that we both spent some time in the same city, but at different points in time. In Houston, in Singapore, I was in Singapore as the founding chair of the Biomedical Department and the founding director of Biomedical Research Center at Nanyang Technological University. And Professor Dragomir is a senior researcher at the National University of Singapore, and is also a professor at the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Houston. He has been affiliated with the Biomedical Engineering Journal, IFMBE, as a deputy editor for several years, and he is also a recipient of several awards. And it's very important to know that he has published several papers, so he's got first-hand experience of all the challenges involved in getting a paper published. So we are really fortunate that he has come there in person. I wish I could also have joined him, but I'm really delighted that he's there in person to share with you information about the journal and some very, very key points on why you should be publishing in our journal and how we write a scientific paper. So this session is in 2 parts. I think the first part was supposed to be how to write a scientific paper, but we thought we would request Professor Dragomir first to talk about the journal, so you get an idea of the journal, and then he can go to the nitty-gritties of publishing a scientific paper. And he has an excellent style, and then you can actually ask questions whenever you have important questions to ask him. At the end, there is also a question-answer session. So with that, I would like to say that I thank you very much for allowing me to chair the session, and I'm going to say this. Thank you very much. And please join me in welcoming Professor Andrei Dragomir.
Thank you, Richard, for the introduction. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining our session. So, as Professor Krishna mentioned, I'm representing here the Medical, Biological Engineering and Computing Journal, which is the home journal of the IFMBE. And I'm a deputy editor for the journal since last year and have been publishing in IFMBE for the past 15 years, working as a reviewer and now as a deputy editor. So I will try to provide the perspective over the journal, and then we'll give a presentation of how to write and publish a scientific paper from all these 3 directions, as an author, reviewer, and deputy editor. Also, please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. This is not a very formal lecture. I welcome feedback from all of you, so please don't be constrained by a very formal format. So first, let me give you a bit of background on why we think that IFMBE journal should be a first option for any biomedical engineer to publish, and that is because, as you see there, it covers the entire spectrum of biomedical and clinical engineer, and you will see on the next slide all the research areas in which we actually have audience and expertise. It's a truly multidisciplinary journal, as biomedical engineering is by definition, and also interdisciplinary. So we strive to incorporate new and emerging fields such as cellular engineering, molecular imaging, involving technologies, AI, medicine, and so on. And due to this multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, we do have a very wide audience. So people from most of the subfields of biomedical engineers read our journal and publish in our journal. So we publish both original and review articles, experimental and theoretical articles. So we have an editorial team that consists of 62 experts that are covering all the research areas that you see on the next slides, and they are actually global distributed. It's another strong point of our journal. So besides the wide scope, we have experts from all around the world, so people that are familiar with the local, let's say, research environment and can help with their review. Another thing is, another important point for MBEC is that it's been published continuously since 1963, so this is the 60th year of existence of the journal. And in the nowadays context in which several hundred journals appear every year and another several hundred disappear, I think this is a very important point which I will highlight also during the next session on how to write a paper and how to search for a suitable journal for your publication. So I was actually going through, you can find all our archive since 1963 online. I was actually going to the first edition 60 years ago of MBEC, and the first paper that was published was applications of television in medicine. So by television means TV screens, right? So that tells you, how old and how much history we have with this journal. All right, so as I mentioned, we covered basically the whole spectrum of biomedical engineering. We have, and by covering means that we have associate editors that are experts in each of these fields that you see here. And here you can see some of the names. They are not all of them. As I mentioned, we have an editorial team consisting of 62 associate editors. So the fields here cover both the more, let's say, traditional areas of biomedical engineering, such as medical imaging, physiological systems, medical instrumentation and devices, and so on. But also newer fields, artificial organs, AI, medicine, and machine intelligence, cellular engineering, human performance engineering, rehabilitation engineering. So we're basically trying to cover all these areas, and we are constantly updating our editorial team so that newer or more trendier areas are very well represented, as we see that submissions increasing in some specific parts of the journal, of the field. Now, just a bit about our editorial structure. So, as Professor Friedman mentioned, our editor-in-chief is Shambao Tong. From China. He's been editor-in-chief since last year. We have 5 dedicated editors, and as you see here, they are quite well geographically distributed, including Eastern Europe, Asia, America, and Europe, and so on. Also, one point that I want to make is that we are very diverse, not only geographically, but also gender. So, in terms of dedicated editors, you see that the majority there is female. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. We have, I mentioned the number of 62 associate editors, and we are constantly updating. These are just the ones that have been recently added. We have Prof. Krishnan, who is coordinating the operations of the journals, and then managing editors, they work with Professor Tong. They are based in Shanghai Jiaotong University. Now, what happens to your papers, publications, future publications when you actually submit them to a journal. This is more or less a general diagram, but every journal has their own particularities, and I'm just going to give a brief overview of what happens in our journal to understand what is the whole pipeline here. So basically, when you're submitting your publication, it goes to the journal office, which are actually employees of Springer who check for formatting of the journal, if the paper follows the specific guidelines. They run a plagiarist check with automated tools and provide a report to us, to the deputy editors. And that's where the first, let's say, screening of the papers occur at the level of the deputy editors, in our journal at least. So we basically look, as I mentioned, we are 5 deputy editors. Each of them has more or less a specific area of expertise. Mine is brain-machine interfaces, neuroscience, and neural engineering. So the papers are assigned to us by the managing editors according to our background, and we do a quick screening of the paper to see whether, from a scientific point of view, it's actually up to the standards of the journal, whether there is novelty, whether there is impact, and so on. And once we establish that indeed these points are covered, then we forward the manuscript to the associate editors, which are the actual experts that will handle your paper. So the associate editors, they are people that are very closely working in the areas very closely related to the topic of your paper. And they are responsible for recruiting reviewers who will actually review your manuscript. And once they collect the feedback from the reviewers, the associate editors will issue a decision or a recommendation for a decision, which will be forwarded to the editor-in-chief, who actually takes the final decision whether it is the paper is accepted or it needs minor revisions, and so on. Or rejected, of course. Do you have any question up to here? Right. So this is pretty standard procedure. Just one point that I would like to make, and I will emphasize on the next slides also, is that this is, I mean, due to this pipeline, this is where most of the delays in actually processing your paper occurs, right? So I don't know what are your experiences with other journals, but some journals lag. I mean, it takes. I published, for example, last year a paper in a nanotechnology journal. It basically took. So the paper was submitted in early 2021. It was published. It was accepted for publication in 2020, at the end of last year, December 2022, and it's online only now in summer 2023. So there's a lot. Journals usually have a lot of delays. Depends on how optimized this pipeline is here. So I want to point out that we're actually trying to do a better job at speeding up here without compromising the value of the feedback that the authors get from us. Now, our journal publishes 12 issues every year, so monthly issues. Besides that, we have every year at least 1 or 2 special issues. And by special issues means that these come besides so on top of the other 12 issues, monthly issues, and they are more specialized on specific topics. Okay, so right now we have a special issue that has actually just closed for submission. This is the 60th anniversary special issue that will be published in November probably. The papers were accepted. We have another one that is running deadline October 23 on AI-based algorithms in post-COVID era. And we are also setting proposals for special issues. So if you are working in an area, and I'm addressing now to a more senior audience here, if you are working in an area that has anything to do with biomedical engineer, please submit a proposal to the journal, and we'll be happy to consider it and go ahead with the special issue. So basically, professors can submit this proposal on a specific topic, and they will be able to attract submissions for that specific topic and handle the review of the papers. All right. Another feature that we very recently introduced is that for every monthly issue, the editorial board of the paper votes on the 4 best, most impactful papers, and the top 4 are being put on the so-called editor's choice, which are highlighted in the journal, so online, and authors get free access, so the audience actually gets free access for 2 months to this paper. So basically, even if you don't opt for the open access option, you don't pay for it, these papers, if they are selected by the editor, they will still be available for free access for 2 months. And of course, the authors will get awards for this. I'm just going to skip this part. Professor Krishnan went over, and I want to give just a bit of stats on our journal. So we are working really hard, as I mentioned, to optimize the pipeline. As you see here, the time to first decision is 57 days. Now, of course, there are some journals that do much faster for that, but I would issue a warning here. If your paper gets processed too fast and it reaches a decision, the editors reach a decision, that's not a very, it's better, right? That's not a very good sign. So currently our timeline to the first decision is about 57 days. Just to give a comparison, 2 years ago, we were about 120 days to the first decision. So we're improving drastically. That was not a good number. But I think currently we're doing quite well, and we're aiming to grow that to probably around 40 days. Time to final disposition accept, so that's the average time until your paper gets accepted. If it gets to there, it's about 240 days, which I think it's quite okay compared to other journals, well-established journals. And as you see here, also you will learn quite fast whether your paper was rejected. Another thing is that if your paper gets rejected at a very early stage, what we call a desk rejection, so basically the screening that we do at the journal, we're aiming to do that very fast, so that's fair to the authors. They don't wait too long until they can resubmit their work if they decide so. And we also aim to give quite substantial feedback, even if the paper gets rejected at the deputy editor level. All right, so in terms of impact factor, historically MBEC has not been a very high impact journal. Impact factor is important, but it's not the only thing that you should look at the journal. In any case, we are going quite well. As you see, we're improving over the past 5 years. The impact factor is currently at 3.2, and the site score is at 6.1. I think we are in the second quartile Scopus for biomedical engineering. A few more stats. As you see here, also the number of submissions is growing dramatically compared to last year. Last year we had about 1,200 papers submitted. Already we see an increase this year of 25%, so that's another confirmation that the journal is growing. We are becoming also more selective, and that will eventually lead to an increase in the impact factor as well. So currently about less than 17% of the papers that are submitted to the journal are actually accepted. Number of publications, as you see here, remains quite stable in terms of monthly number. Alright, so bottom line,
these are the few things that I wanted to highlight about the journal and why we think that MBEC is a suitable venue for biomedical engineers, and I highly encourage you to consider this journal for publishing your work. Anything that has to do with engineering or computing applications in medicine and biology, we cover that. Okay, so even I've seen a lot of nice presentations in the conference on nanotechnologies. If that work has a biological or medical application, please consider submitting to our journal. All right, so any question that you have related to MBEC? Come on, please. Yes, to that. Yes.
The question is related to how do you handle the number of articles of paper in an issue? Do you have, I don't know, a certain number you have to reach to fill an issue? And if you have less or more papers, what do you do then?
Yeah. So basically, you know, from the moment the paper is accepted to the time it is, I mean, it appears online quite fast. Within a few days, the paper is published online. But in order to appear in an issue, that takes longer. So basically what happens is we have quite a large backlog of papers from which the editor-in-chief can choose how to assign to... so we basically don't need to wait until we reach a certain number of papers. Yeah. So it comes quite smooth.
Professor Dragovic, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I also give some input on this? Can they hear me too?
Yes, yes, they can hear you.
Okay, I do not know who raised this question, but it's a very good question. You know, you are the one who asked the question.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, I think it's a very interesting question. You said, what happens if you have too many papers or too little papers? So let's come to the first one, too many. We love to have many papers. That is the purpose of our whole, this event. We want people to submit papers. You know, without papers there will be no journal, obviously, right? We want more papers. So if we have more papers, the editor-in-chief, Professor Dragovic, is excited. You know, it's like having more money to spend than not having money. You know? So he has more papers to select from. You know, so I think the more papers is not a problem. We have a huge network of deputy editors, associate editors, and reviewers. So of course, there's a lot of work for the reviewers to go through the papers and review. But as I said, more papers is not a problem. We look forward to having more papers. That's our dream. And that's why we are doing this. Less papers, but I must emphasize here, less papers means we don't run into that situation because I think Professor Dragovic already showed a slide where the number of papers which are accepted or which are rejected, you know. The number of acceptance is very low, you know, it's something of the order of 70–80% or something, which is large number of papers do not necessarily get accepted. But because we have a lower number of papers, we will not simply publish the paper which do not meet our requirements. It's not that. We want to maintain high quality. Professor Dragovic, Professor Shanmugam, they will not simply say, well, this month we don't have enough paper, so let's, somebody got lower grade and we accept them. No, that will not take place. And also, we always have a reservoir. In other words, we have a lot of paper in the pipeline. So I think we don't run into that situation. But please note that we do not accept no quality paper, and the reviewers' comments are going to be very helpful for you to revise the paper. You know, Professor Dragovic and all his colleagues are always here to help you. You know, the reason we are here also for this session is to ensure that we help you. We want you to publish in our journal. That doesn't mean you always get accepted. You could have witnessed one time. There are three outcomes. One is accepted, one is rejected, and the one is revised, to be revised. So we will fall in that middle category now. So the comments from reviewers are constructive, so please ensure you take care of it. But it's a very good question. I hope you got the answer.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. So I understood the acceptance rate doesn't count on the number of papers you get for the revision.
No, no. Quality is important. We want to maintain a high quality, and because of that, our impact are quite high. And we want to maintain, and we want to go higher. But we want you to consider spreading the word, and please, you try to submit papers to our journal, ask your collaborators, your supervisors, your contacts, please ask them to submit, initially you can consider, in some conference paper, but I think for purpose of journal paper is very important. And later, after some question, I will also make a comment on the importance of the publication. I would like to know, I feel happy because it's the middle of the night here.
All right. Any other question? Puteți să întrebați și pe românește dacă... Sau în limba rusă, avem cine să traducă.
How is used AI in biomedical industry? And when do you think that Moldova can realize that specs?
Well, that's a bit of a wide discussion over here. We can, I mean, look, AI is already in use in many areas, right? I would say even Moldova. That's not we shouldn't look at this issue as Moldova is not up to the current trend. Now I can tell you, how are we using AI in our journal, right? And we have the plagiarism detection checks that actually rely heavily on AI and text mining. So that's one of the things that I will also point in the next session on how to write a paper. So right now there are tools that that can detect very easily whether there is very high similarity in the text of the papers compared to existing publications. So that's one of the areas that, in terms of editorial work, where AI is being used. Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
How your federation is fighting with smoking?
Smoking?
With smoking.
I can tell you that I'm not a smoker, so I don't really have
we all know smoke is no good.
Yes, of course, of course. Look, I think this is again off topic. It's not the goal of our federation for that. As Professor Krishnan mentioned, IFMBE consists of, it's an umbrella for biomedical engineering society, national society. So I think these kind of topics must be addressed if it's a topic that should be addressed by the biomedical engineering societies at the local level and not at the level of the federation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
One of the major reasons for journal to get rejected is, of course, the quality, as you mentioned. But from my experience, sometimes it also gets rejected because it doesn't fit into the aims and scope of the particular journal. So this is something that I find really confusing, like how broad or how narrow could that scope be, or that it can fit into it.
Yes.
Can you please address this?
Sure. All right. So thank you for the question. Yes, that's actually a very good point, and unfortunately, even for experienced researchers, we sometimes are faced with this. Just to give you an example, last year I wanted to publish. I worked recently in olfactory perception, brain-based. So for that, a major venue of publication is chemical senses. It's a paper that is very well established. So we said, okay, we'll submit. They they accepted work. I checked their publication history, they accepted work with EEG that we are working with, so I just did, you know. And I got a rejection, which was really surprising. Rejection being, this rejection, your paper is out of scope of the journal. The thing is that the editorial thing changed. I checked the scope of the paper. Every journal, they have aims and scope section, so I will point out a bit in more detail on the upcoming presentation. So the first thing that you have to do is be sure that you actually check the details on the journal website. Every journal has a section of aims and scope, right? And there they mention, sometimes in more detail, sometimes in less detail, what kind of areas they address. But sometimes, you know, you may think that you are still within the scope, like was my case, and still get rejected. You know, that rarely happens. It was because the editorial team changed and they're in between of a major shift in the journal direction. So I was unlucky because of this point of view. But coming back to MBEC, I think if you are working in biomedical engineering, there's I don't see a situation in which your paper will be rejected being out of scope, right? Because as I mentioned, MBEC is has one of the widest scopes of the journals out there. Some journals, they are very narrow focused on a specific topic, but that's not the case with MBEC. So that's why I think that, you know, MBEC is really should be the first option for any biomedical engineer that publishes. As you saw, we have a wide area, a wide range of areas that we are covering, right? So just from my experience working as a deputy editor, I only had one paper that I rejected being out of scope because I think it was submitted by mistake. It had to do with transport infrastructure, so I don't know how actually it reached the work, because normally it should be authors should be informed by the editorial assistants, the Springer assistants working, but somehow it reached. So it's only one out of several hundreds. So MBEC, for sure you will not have that issue if you are working in biomedical engineering. So anything that has to do with applications of engineering or computing in medicine, biology will covered.
Any other question?
May I add a comment also, please?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it is very good. And Professor Dragomir actually showed a slide which covers so many areas. You know, in days that people are going so specialized, the slide, look at the areas covered. It's unbelievable. You know, many of them are like, they are focused only on imaging, only on sensors, only on signal processing, but our areas covered are so many. So the probability of the paper not fitting into one of these may be very low. You know, of course, as I mentioned earlier, and Professor Dragomir will repeatedly convey, the quality is very important. There are many things in terms of novelty and what is the contribution done by this particular paper. All these are important. But since this is a very broad spectrum of coverage, I think the probability of getting rejected because it is not within our area. But in addition to these, by the way, there are also emerging areas. Okay, let's say there is no specific explanation, mention of cybersecurity, and it has something to do with the physiological data and interpretation that comes within still biomedical engineering. Medical informatics, there are many aspects which come within biomedical engineering. So these are all covered. So, you know, this is really a broad spectrum coverage. By the way, may I ask a question? The person who asked the question, is it a student, a faculty, PhD student, or I would like to know.
I'm a PhD student. I joined my PhD this February from Germany.
Excellent. So I hope you consider, you know, one of the advantages of having this session is you submit the paper and you also write a note to Professor Dragomir and say, I have submitted the paper. And if somebody rejects, you know, based on the reason you mentioned, you can also ask for additional explanation. Normally, the editorial team is always willing to help the people. we are doing this publication to get the papers published. So we are happy when you get the papers published.
Generally,
also thank you for attending the conference. I'm very glad.
Thank you, thank you. As you said, like for MBEC, it's quite good because it is a broad-scoped journal, but it's a little bit confusing, I think, when it comes to narrow scope-based journals, right? So that is where I really wanted to have the question too. But yes, for MBEC, it's quite broad scope, so it's quite appealing. Thank you.
Excellent. And occasionally, we have this so-called special issues on special topics. I think from the driveway will convey later, or there's some special topics. Now, the papers submitted cannot fit within that special topic journal. Then it may be the reason, but not always possible. Okay. Once again, I thank all of you for attending.
Any other question? Okay.
No, I have another thing. Is it possible, we have a technical expert, is it possible that we can get a picture of everybody who is in the room along with me, all with modern technology you can do? You can project that. Possible. I think my picture is frozen. I'm frozen.
Yeah.
So, can you ask Professor Driver, can you ask how many are PhD students attending? How many
of you are PhD students? Cât sunteți doctoranți aici? Okay, there are about 10.
Excellent, excellent. And how many are master students?
Master students? Master students? Masterans? Only one? Then the others are undergrads? Ceilalți? What, students? Okay, so majority are undergrads actually.
Oh, that is very good. That makes me very happy. How many are undergrads? I'm very happy.
Okay, can you raise the hand to everyone else?
I can't think well, so you can count the number and that will be great.
Yeah. I think we're around 50 audience right now. And we're also faculty as well. We should not ignore them. Yeah.
Oh, no, they are coming to the faculty. For faculty, the slogan "Publish or Perish" is absolutely vital. So how many faculty members are there?
Yeah, that's true. Right now, I see at least... So who is faculty over here? Professors? About 10, I'd say. Yeah. About 10.
Very good. I think publication is very important. And it turns out that I have had experience in the university setting, in hospitals. I worked at Harvard University Hospital and some large hospitals, and also in industry, in manufacturing, research. The point I'd like to make, I think, can you unfreeze me? I'm frozen actually. My picture, I don't see my screen moving. But it's okay. As long as you can see me and hear me, it's okay. So the point I want to emphasize is, for undergraduates, there are so many going to graduate school. So to have an undergraduate degree, it is not required necessarily to have a publication. But if you have a publication, you stand a chance to get accepted to master's and PhD programs and preferably scholarship. So you are not only taken courses, but you want to publish. So this is really good if you have done undergraduate research. In US, there is some program called URE, Undergraduate Research Experience. So that is really good for getting into good graduate schools and good graduate program. For master's students, of course, if they want to continue on PhD, I think publication is important as well. Okay, now I got control. Thank you. And then, for PhD, for faculty, it goes without saying, have to publish. So publications are absolutely important for faculty. Now, I want to say, what for people who want to work in industry? Why do you think publication is important for them? I work in industry. I will tell you why it is important. Because the publication, as Professor Dragomir will show you later, how to write a nice paper, it reflects your communication skills. You are able to get a paper published and you have conveyed your ideas so nicely that anybody can read and understand. So communication is a very important skill a person must have, not only in academia and industry as well. In fact, it is stressed that a lot of graduate students are not very good at communicating. And engineers in general like to not publish and communicate. But I think communication is extremely important. So I think for these reasons, I think publishing is important. I would also like to say that if you have any questions for me, I can answer now because there is going to be a second session on how to write a scientific paper. But I would like to request that any of you who may be interested in serving our journal as reviewers, please give your names to Professor Vladimir and he can collect and you need to send your CV along with it. I see there are some faculty there, you are interested. We are always looking for recruitment. And then even PhD students, the one who said that it may be outside the area, they can actually get experience as a reviewer. So once you get experience as a reviewer, it's easy to get published as well because you need to know what's happening on the other side of the fence. So if you have any question for me from IFMBE side, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions? You have Professor Krishnan? No?
No questions.
No question.
I wish I could have been there in person along with Professor Dragomir. He's enjoying and I'm suffering here without enjoying the Moldovan hospitality. But I will come. Please give Professor Victor Soreta my best regards and also all the organizers for arranging this conference. I feel sorry that I missed the lecture by the Nobel laureate. And also lecture by our good friend, Professor Nicholas Polycratis. So we want some reviewers, and I also want to take the opportunity to invite all of you to our World Congress, which is taking place in 2025 in Adelaide, in October 2025 in Adelaide, Australia. So there is a lot of time for you to prepare for the papers. There are also student competitions. So you get the awards, there are also monetary awards for them. And the possibility of getting conference papers published in journal is high. If your paper is selected to be one of the best because you're judged by a team of experts in the field. So please try to take part in IFMBE activities. And biomedical engineering, by the way, is a kind of recession-proof future. People are always concerned about health, and people are living longer, and their expectations are changing. So, I think there is always a very strong, bright future for biomedical engineering. It is an interdisciplinary field, so in comparison to other fields, it is actually more demanding because you need to know many engineering fields, and then you need to apply to solving problems in medicine and biology, which are very complex. So, you have chosen a fantastic field. Once again, my sincere thanks to organizers and the gentleman who is sitting in front of me and smiling, for making arrangement for this technical show and all the attendees. So I want to you to join me in giving a big round of applause to all of you. I think I am introduced Professor Craig there, and he is actually an expert, and we are really delighted that he could be there in person. So I can sign up, and I want to really take part in this. To us is very important. So now what I have to do is go to sleep.
Thank you, Professor Krishna, and definitely we're waiting for you here in Moldova in 2 years from now, the next conference.
Yeah, please invite me. I will come there for sure. I need to eat Moldovan food and learn more Romanian.
That's not a prerequisite.
Learn another word which is called, let's see, good luck to all of you. Okay? I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we take a break? Doriți o pauză? 5 minute și după aceea continuăm cu sesiunea cealaltă How to Write a Sentence. Okay, 5 minutes break and then we
I'm trying to give a perspective here that I mentioned in the previous session as well. The perspective from different directions. As an author, as an editor, and also as a reviewer, because I think all of them, they are very important in creating a publication that is impactful and successful. Alright, so first of all, before you actually start the paper, before you actually write down the first words, you need to have a checklist that will look something like this. Not necessarily exactly this, but at least run it through your mind along these lines. Have I done something new and interesting? Yeah. So, how would you assess this? This is mostly based on the literature that you have studied. Otherwise, you wouldn't know if what you're doing is actually new and worth publishing. And then, if the question to that is yes, are there any challenges in the work that I have addressed? So, are there any new things that I've come up with? Have I provided solutions to some difficult problems in research? And how does my work further or improve current knowledge? Right. So, before even starting to write the paper, you must have such a checklist and make sure that the answer to all these questions is yes. Yeah. Now, of course, so we are supposed to have actually completed the research work, experiments, you have results, right? So that's when you actually start to ask these questions. All right. So again, before you actually start writing, it is very useful that you actually have materials that you have gathered during your research work, during your performing your experiment. Right, or while performing your literature research, right? So try at every step to document your work. This is, now this is very common that you have regular lab meetings, right, in which you actually share results with your colleagues or with your supervisor. You have maybe some projects that can summarize the literature. You may already have a short list of figures that you have used in certain presentations for classes or for updating your lab and so on, right? So it's very easy to actually start writing when you have already all these materials very well organized and present, right? So once you have this, you need to start strategize and organize your work, right? So think about how does your work fit into existing literature, right? Try to understand your audience. So the idea is to actually begin with the end in mind. You should not think of, how should I write the introduction and how should I, make the flow of the paper. Just think that the paper is not actually a presentation. Many people see this as a presentation of what they've done. I need to just throw in there my results of the experiments. No. A publication is actually what you want the others to understand from your work, right? So in order to, there's a fine distinction then, right? So in order to achieve this, make sure that you think, you know, how others are viewing your work. Because if you try to get this other perspective, then it will be much easier in both organizing your work, because you know your work much better than all the others, but will the others understand what you are writing over there? Right? So begin with the end in mind, begin with the audience in mind. Who are you addressing, right? And from that perspective, try to somehow adjust the way that you write the paper, right? So once you have all this, then you can start looking for a target journal. This is relatively easy, you may think, but it's becoming more and more complex. That's because, as I just mentioned also in the previous session, there has been a statistic, I think last year, that almost 1,000 new journals appeared within the last year only. 1,000 new scientific journals. You can imagine that, you know, vast majority of that is just junk, you know. So you don't want to publish your work in a junk journal, right? So look before you actually start. You know, there's a you can check this website, thinkchecksubmit.org. This is an alliance created by scientists to give you a bit of background on how to actually identify journals that are what we call predatory, you know. And you're probably also receiving, nowadays I'm receiving like almost on a daily basis 10 or 20 emails. Doctor, please submit your work, we're in need of papers, submission deadline in 2 days. That's already a sign that that journal is junk. I mean, they cannot expect you to actually have something ready work to submit in 2 days, you know, something that is of high quality, right? And just keep in mind that, you know, a publication is there on your CV, right? So it will send, it's online now. All publications are online. So this is actually part of your persona, right? Once you publish something, it's there. You cannot take it back. So unless, you know, there's some other major issues. So be very careful in submitting, and checking where to submit. Now, one easy way to do that is, as I said previously, to check the journal's aim and scope, right? So make sure that it's within the scope or very close to the scope of your research work, right? Another tip here is that you've already done, you know, quite a lot of literature research. You have checked a lot of publications while doing your research work. So you probably have already noticed that most of those papers come from a handful of journals, 2, 3, right? So that's already a sign that that's where your audience is, right? It's within those 2, 3 journals where most of your references come from, okay? Another thing is to read the author guidelines and understand the format, right? And to browse previously published papers in that journal, because that will help you get familiar both with the style of the journal. You know, some journals expect you to be more technical. Some other publish more, let's say, high-level qualitative description kind of work. So that may help you balance a bit of the level of detail that you actually have in your publication. So once you have the short list of 2, 3 journals where you see that most of your references come from, you know that there are some authors that you appreciate that publish in those journals. You know, read more papers from that journal to understand a bit the format and the style of the journal. All right. Now, how to start? You would say that, just start with the introduction, right? Because that's the standard format. It's the so-called IMRAD, so it's introduction, methods, results, and discussion, and all conclusion, right? So that's the standard format. Some journals they recently switched a bit the format, so they may start after the introduction with the results, like Science or something. And then they have the methods at the end. But generally, the majority of the journals, they follow this structure. So first introduction, first title, abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion or conclusion. So you'd be tempted to say start with introduction, right? well, never do that. I mean, I tell you from my own advice. First paper I wrote, it was a conference paper. First paper I wrote as a PhD student was in the first year of my PhD. I worked in the same lab during my master, so I already had results that we could publish. So my supervisor said, okay, there's a conference deadline in 2 months. Let's submit something there. Right? So 2 months. I said, okay. I was already a bit stressed, but I said, okay, I'll be ready. Within the first, I started. At that time, we did not have, now many universities, they actually have in their curriculum such a course on how to publish a scientific paper. I don't know, do you have anything like that here in Moldova? No? So many universities, they actually offer this course, how to publish. So this could be a semester-long course. What we're trying to do right now is just a crash course, a very short version of it. So you'd say, okay, start with introduction. That's how I started. That was my first paper. No, I never took that class. It was not available. So I started writing the introduction. Generally, I wouldn't say that I'm a great writer. I improve with years, so nobody is expected to be great at the very beginning. But I can tell you that first week I dedicated only to starting to write the paper, and after a week I only had a paragraph written. So I was totally stressed out. I was blocked, like how will I be able to do the rest of the paper? So never do that. Introduction is quite difficult to write down, and that's because it offers a kind of like a global view of the field, right? So you must be aware with a lot of different things. So what everyone, or people that are more expert in writing papers suggest is start with your methods, because that's the easiest thing. That's the part that you actually master, right? You've already done experiments, right? Or you've done your simulations, right? So you have there materials that are ready. You're very familiar. That's the part that you are most familiar with. Methods and results. So that's where you should start from, So advice is to start with the methods. Maybe you have participated in what we call the IRB approvals, right? So when you actually design an experiment, you are supposed to get ethical approval from your institutional review board, right? And that's already a description, a very detailed description of your experiments, right? So you can just take that and plug it into your method section, assuming that has not already been published, so you need to be careful with that as well. All right, so my suggestion, start with the methods. Okay, I'm going to go into each of these sections, so now I'm just going to give a broad overview. Another thing here, before you actually start, make sure that I pointed out here the vision statement. You may ask, what is that? What do you mean by a vision statement of your paper? Any idea? What could that be? If someone asks you what is your work about, right? You would need to, let's say you meet. The Americans have this, what they call the elevator pitch, right? So you are in an elevator, you meet with someone important, a Nobel laureate, right? And they ask you, okay, hello, how are you? What do you work on? So within 10 seconds, you should be able to summarize in so much detail that will make it clear to that person what your work is about, right? But you don't have more than 10, 20 seconds. How long can you travel in the same elevator with that person, So Americans call it an elevator pitch, right? So make sure that you can summarize in 2-3 phrases everything, the most important aspects of your work. If you are able to do that before you start the paper, you're ready to write the paper. If you're not able to do that, make sure that you are improving towards that direction, okay? Because what does that tell first of all to the others and then to you? It tells you that you have a very clear image of what your work is about, a very clear picture of what the audience should understand from your work, right? And you are able to condense this kind of information in just very few phrases. Okay, so that means that you're ready to actually detail all this into a publication. Right? Figures are also quite important. I'm going to show on the next slides in more detail why I consider that and why most of the people consider that. All right, so that's why. Do you have any questions, by the way? Yeah? No? No question? Okay. Again, don't feel shy to ask questions. All right. So again, my advice based on personal experience, everyone recommends that also don't start with introduction. Introduction will come after you write the methods and the results. That's also because most of the times while you're writing the paper, you may observe some, or you may come into like different angles to your work, and you may want to emphasize certain aspects. So if you start with the introduction, you will basically need, for sure, rewrite the introduction by the end you finish the paper. By the time you end writing your paper, you know. That's another reason why to not start with introduction. All right, now figures. Why are figures so important? Right. So we all know this saying that the figure is worth 1,000 words, and the figures and the data that are contained in these figures are actually the driving force of the paper. Right. So make sure that your illustrations are telling. They are descriptive. They can tell, or they can add to the story that you're actually writing in the paper. You know. Now, I will tell you another. I'll go over that from when I talk about the editor's perspective, but also I'll tell you why figures are very important. As a deputy editor, what I mentioned in the previous session, we actually screen, and that happens for most of the journals. We actually screen the papers before we send them to the associate editors and to the reviewers, right? And we get, you saw the numbers there, our journal gets about 100 submissions per month. We are 5 deputy editors, so we need to go through about 20 papers in a month. Right? I have my own lab, I do my own research, right? So I do this on a voluntary basis, this work, and I assign normally Friday afternoons for work for the journal, right? So on 4 Friday afternoons within a month, I need to go through 20 papers, which some of them may not actually be very close to my research area, you know. So what I'm doing, I'm just scanning the paper first, right? If the figures are the first that jump to your eye, right? I mean, okay. If the figures look good, if the figures tell a story, if you are able to understand what are your experiments from just looking at the picture, that's already, you know, that's already a way to make sure that you capture the editor's attention. You know? So very important. Small details are very important. You know, like style, axes. Make sure that you provide. You're probably already familiar with this, but make sure that you provide units of measurements. You will let people know, you know, what does the x-axis mean, the y-axis mean, and so on. Make sure that the figures are self-contained. So the description, you have the caption, right? The text that describes the figure. If, for example, the figure is about, such as this one here from one of our previous paper, the experimental design, just don't write the caption, figure 1, experimental design overview. You know, that's a bit outdated. So right now, most of the journals and most of the editors and the reviewers, they actually look for a detailed description. So in the caption, make sure that you write like 2-3 lines so that the person that actually looks at that figure can understand what is it about. Don't expect them to understand by making them to go into the text and read maybe 2 pages to understand what does that picture represent, that figure represent, you know? So you should add, and this comes back to the vision statement, right? So make sure that you add a description, a brief description of the figure, and people can understand from that description what the figure is about and what is its context in the whole architecture of the paper. Okay? Avoid redundancy. Avoid redundancy and duplicate information. So if you have certain parts of the figure repeated in some additional figures, that's also not very good. That probably sends the signal to the readers that you don't have too much to say, so you're just spreading your information and duplicating it over several figures. Don't add too many numbers in your figure. So if you have results of experimental analysis or comparison with previous work, turn that into a table. Don't put it into a figure. So don't overcrowd with figures. All right. Now, method section. Do you have any question about the figures? No? Method section. So make sure that the method section is described in a logical manner. So we should start by the description of the experimental protocol or surveys or experiments that you have done. Right? Describe very well the samples and the data and the analytical methods that have been used. Structure the methods into subsections so that you have, for example, a subsection describing the experimental protocol, experimental design, another subsection that will describe the actual methods, machine learning or whatever you have done, a subsection that will describe the statistical analysis methods. So most of the papers nowadays, they have a separate subsection in the methods in which there's a general description without results of the statistical tests that have been used in that paper. Okay. Another thing that, and this is again from the editor's perspective, if a paper has their own generated data, so data that has been generated in their own lab, either collected from animals or collected from humans, and so on, make sure that you have what we call an ethical committee approval. So every university has that, right? So the university needs to approve. There's a committee that approves your experiments, right? Particularly if you're working with humans or animals. So make sure you include that information. This protocol has been approved by the institution ethical committee and you provide information. Also, another important thing is that you don't add. I see some papers I see are doing that mistake. Some authors they actually add results into the methods section. That's not good. It's not well to mix that. So keep results for the results section and any comments that you may make and maybe interpreted such as a discussion, leave them for the discussion. So methods should just describe what I mentioned here, right? Experimental protocol, the methods the analytical methods that you have used, statistical methods, and so on. All right. Now, and also the one more thing that I want to point out about the methods. Make sure that you have a logical flow and also a timeline flow, right? So if there are a succession of experiments that you are doing, make sure that you describe in the method section that succession, right? Do not expect from the readers that they will figure out the succession of experiments because they are experts in the field and then they will understand that you cannot do, I'm just giving my research example, you cannot do the power spectral analysis of the EEG before pre-processing, denoising the EEG, right? You cannot do that. So don't expect that they will know that. Actually present the information in the logical flow in the section. Right? And that stands for the results as well. So for the results section, make sure that you also you present the results in the same logical flow that you have in the methods, right? So if you start with a particular methodology, let's say machine learning, right? You're doing some classification. Make sure that you start with the results of that methodology in the results section of it. So follow the same structure, the same flow also in the results, right? Another thing, make sure that you provide all the details of the statistical test results. Many of the reviewers are very picky on the information that you provide there. So, it's common that you will say, okay, what other can you provide except for the p-value, right? I mean, that's the output of the statistical results. But no, I mean, you can check there are papers on that actually, what kind of information you should provide on your statistical test, right? You can provide, if you're running ANOVAs, let's say, or regression or some degrees of freedom, you can provide the effect sizes, right? So a thorough reviewer will sample size also, right? So don't expect that the reviewer will just go back to the methods and they will remember, oh, this guy, they used data from 30 animals. No. When you present the results of the test, there's a standard way of writing down the results of the statistical test in which you also present the sample size. Right? So all the details of the statistical test should be provided in the results. Or for example, there's a trend that I see right now in becoming it is more popular, you know, for statistics journals, but right now also biomedical engineering papers, they actually are quite strict on that, and also the neuroscience papers that where I'm publishing, they are very, very strict on that. If you're running multiple statistical tests, I don't know how familiar are you with the procedure of multiple test correction. Have you heard of that? False discovery rate? No? So let's say, I'll just give an example. So I'm doing EEG data analysis. EEG has a number of locations from across the scalp where you're actually recording data, right? So let's say you have 64 channels where you actually record data, and you want to find some biomarkers, and you run from each of these locations on the brain, right? So 64. So you're running 64 statistical tests, right? You're trying to understand which are the markers that are significantly different at each of these locations between different conditions, right? And you are reporting only the p-values, right? Well, this, you know, a thorough, rigorous statistical test requires that you actually do what is called multiple test correction, right? So the more tests you run, the more likely it is that the outcome will be biased or will be by chance, right? So there are these methods that are called the FDR, false discovery rate, to detect the type 1, type 2 error, you know. So there's a procedure that is called Benjamin-Hochberg that we are mostly using. So basically you have a number of p-values, and then you're running a statistical test on those p-values to adjust their value to the number of tests that you're doing. Because if you're running a statistical test at confidence level 5%, you're running 100 tests, that means that you have 5% chance of getting a result by chance, you know. So by correcting for that, you're sure that the actual results that you're getting are significantly different. All right. Another trend, recent trend, is that a lot of publications, a lot of journals, they have the option to publish supplementary materials. So you don't need to include all your results into the paper itself, but you can actually dump some of them into the supplementary material. So keep only the most relevant results in the paper, and then those that are secondary, you know, you may still find them very interesting, and audience also find them very interesting, but they are not, you know, the key points that you want to make into that paper. Okay, so it's very common right now that you know, in the supplementary materials you actually have more results than in the results section in the paper. You know? So in the results section in the paper, just keep those that are crucial to the point that you want to make with the publication. Right? All right. So as I mentioned previously, once you're done with writing the methods and the results, then, in my opinion, you are ready to go back and write the actual introduction. You know? And as I said, that's because many times when you're writing, that almost always happens to me. When I'm writing the results, I find that I'm actually putting more emphasis on some of the results, and which may offer a different view to the reader than I actually had at the beginning of writing down the paper. So, in the introduction, you know, just think of it over an hourglass, and I think I'll have it on, yeah. Think of it something like this, right? So this is your introduction. In the introduction, you know, this is an hourglass shape, right? Clepsydra, right? So, in the introduction, you start to be very general, right? So you give an overview of the field, state of the art, and so on. And then you need to identify where is the knowledge gap. What are the problems with the current state of the art? You know? So your focus narrows. Right? So as you start writing the introduction, you should think of this. First, I'm being very general. What is the problem that I'm addressing? You know, how others have addressed it? You know, so what is the question that I'm solving? Are there any solutions? Which is the best of them, and what is the main limitation? Right? So this is the logical flow that you should follow. Right? And once you identify the flaws, the disadvantages, the drawbacks of the previous works in that specific area, then you must mention, okay, so in order to address those flaws, I did this. You know, my hypothesis was that, you know, whatever your hypothesis was, and this is how I addressed the problem that there was in the literature. You know. All right, so make sure that there is this logical flow in the introduction, and also always towards the end of your introduction should be a clear description of what was your objective and hypothesis, right? And what is the novelty of your work? And I'm telling that also from an editor perspective. When we screen the papers, we actually go directly there and see. Did the author mention what is the novelty? I mean, clearly state what is the novelty of your work. If we see that is well articulated, we forward the paper. I mean, we say, okay, there seems to be some novelty. Maybe I'm out of the area of expertise of that paper. I cannot, clearly judge whether indeed there's a novelty in the paper. I will not read the whole paper in detail, methodology, results, and so on. But I will say that, okay, the authors have honestly addressed these points. They identified their novelty, limitations in the state of the art, and so on. So I will forward it to the associate editors who will look in more details, and the reviewers will look in more detail because they are closer experts to it, right? So again, you start with very general overview of the field, identify what the problems are, mention the strategy that you have used to address that, what are your hypotheses, and so on, right? And then once you identify the knowledge gap, then that is the action that you took, right? Your methods, your experiments, and so on. And then this part here is actually where the discussion and the conclusion comes, right? So towards the end of the paper, you need to open again the focus of your work, right? You need to put your results into a perspective, right? So you need to explain those findings, those results that you have. How do they compare to what is already out there? What do they bring new compared to the state of the art? And that's what you should put in the discussion. Okay? So, what do the results mean? Do they support your initial hypothesis? Sometimes it's quite okay to start with a different. Just be fair. You start with a different hypothesis. Well, many times, many of the discoveries in science, they are accidental, right? You start with a hypothesis, but then your results prove that hypothesis wrong, but they are still interesting and novel by themselves, So it's very okay to actually, say that our initial hypothesis was contradicted, but we found these things, So that's perfectly fine. Again, so in the discussion, you must clearly mention, how does your research fit in the context of other works, and how does your study add to the body of knowledge? So make sure that you re-emphasize what is the novel things that you are presenting in your paper, and make sure that you don't, consistently repeat the same things. Just make it succinct, right? Also, avoid statements that go beyond what the results can support. So if you have a set of results, just don't pull too much and say that, oh, these results may mean this and that. That's another common mistake. Also, it's good practice to discuss weaknesses and discrepancies. So as I mentioned before, if your results contradict your initial hypothesis or contradict even the common knowledge in the field, that's perfectly fine. You may find something that is highly contradictory. Don't be afraid of that. As long as you handle your results very well and you are sure that your results are correct and you are very confident on the thoroughness of your analysis, that's perfectly fine. So you need to stay there. But be careful that may raise a feedback from the reviewers, first of all, who are experts in the field, and they may challenge you on your findings. And then smoothly transition into the conclusion. All right? It's also quite common that even some of the reviewers ask, okay, what are your future work plans? Okay, so that's something that you may also add in the discussion or in the conclusion. Conclusion is kind of like a repetition of the last part of the introduction, where you actually just summarize the points that your research has actually achieved. Okay? All right, and then at the end always at the end the abstract, right? Because the abstract, think of the abstract is kind of like an advertisement, advertisements of your work, right? So make sure that the abstract and the title, they are catchy, but not exaggerated, you know? So you're not overstating what you actually did, all right? And also keep in mind that while most of the current journals, they are behind the paywall, so the whole paper may not be accessible to everyone, the abstract is always free, right? So how do you make the people to actually go and download the PDF of your work, right? Maybe they need to log into a VPN to download the paper. You need to make them do that through your abstract, right? Make your abstract concise, but interesting, and clearly state what is novel there, you know, in your work. So it's kind of like an advertisement, as I say. So craft your abstract and the title in such a way. So again, provide a perspective and the purpose of the paper. Tell the readers what has been done and what are the important findings in your research. Be accurate, concise, and offer a short description of the interpretation and conclusion in the last sentence of the abstract. Right? So try to compress as much as possible, and then again, this again comes back to the vision statement that I mentioned previously, right? So the abstract is basically a summary of your whole paper. So it needs to describe the general state of the art, needs to describe your approach, needs to describe your findings, and to say what is relevant to your findings in the context of the current state of the art, right? So, and many journals, they only give you probably like 200 words to do all that, right? So you need to be, sometimes, you know, the abstract takes more time than writing, for me, than writing the methods, you know, or even the results sometimes. So that's where you should focus quite a lot. Also avoid using scientific jargon, you know, so not everyone that reads your paper is actually an expert in that specific, you know, very narrow field of your work. So if you want to get citations from others that are, they may use your methods in a different way, in a different area, right? So if you're using jargon directly from the abstract, you may just, you know, exclude that readership. The people that may not be familiar to some very specific methodology that you have used. So try to be quite general in the abstract still. Okay? Also avoid using abbreviations most of the times. I mean, you need to describe that, so you're just eating up from your space in the abstract. Right? Also no references. All right. So this is the, in a very concise manner, as I said, this kind of lecture can be given over the whole semester, so I just try to make it very brief. This is from the author's perspective. Right? Do you have any question so far? Yes.
Dacă se face în română.
Da, sigur.
Aveți ceva recomandări referitor la cuvinte cheie?
Cuvinte cheie? Da. Yeah. So the question was for those that are not speaking Romanian about keywords, you know, if there are any recommendations. That's a very good point actually, because again, keywords come up in, you know, your searches online, right? So if you want to get viewership, you need to make sure that you have the right keywords, you know, and you have the adequate readership. So again, this comes with, in a way, with experience, because you must know your field quite well enough, you know, to actually be able to pinpoint what are the relevant keywords, you know. One trick here would be to just, you know, look the keywords of the papers that you have been using. You're advancing, let's say you have some methods in literature that you have used and you have expanded on those. So see what keywords have they used, you know. That's one trick, let's say. Right? Another thing is just think from the audience perspective, right? Someone that looks for a paper that may find your paper interesting. What would they look? What would be their search terms be? You know. So just think from the other side. What would you know, add there to, if you would search for your paper, what would you search for? You know, that's kind of a very brief advice. Any other question? Yes.
You told about this for a couple of minutes, but I wanted to ask you still, what the right time to start writing a paper? Since the research is a continuing process and we can accumulate data and accumulate and we can do it forever, but at a certain point we are forced to publish it. So from your perspective as an author, as an editor, when is the right time to start and publish a paper on the results we got and not wait to gain more and more results?
That's a great question, actually. We as scientists, we tend to be perfectionists, right? So I have students that I'm begging them, just stop it, it's enough. I mean, you can always improve, you know, I mean, but you can never put into a paper so much information, right? So, unfortunately, I had, you know, friends that have wasted years of PhD just because they wanted to just do one more experiment, just add some more, and then they finally published the paper, and it didn't get so much attention as they thought it would, you know. So that's a quite fine balance. One advice here is to always interact with peers, some people that you trust, colleagues, right, or advisors, right? Someone that can, first of all, offer you a perspective from outside, because when you actually do your work, you become so much involved with it, you know, it's kind of like a relationship, right? I mean, you cannot get out of it, you're just stuck there. So, you know, just ask others' opinion, you know. Have a look at this manuscript, or at these experiments that I've done. What do you think? Are they publishable? You know, always peer feedback, what we call peer feedback, it's really useful because they will give you, you know, they have an outsider's point of view. And they may say, wow, this is great, or, oh, you see, maybe I don't understand this part. I mean, what is the connection between this result and that result? And then you understand, oh, there's a gap there that I should fill with some other results, you know. So I would say here, the best approach is to discuss, you know, of course with people that you trust. You trust that they will not take your work and, you know, but this is very important. We do this even, you know, when writing grant proposals. So grant proposal is another thing, it's a very similar thing. Share with people that you are close with and you know that they have expertise in that area, you know, and don't aim to be, you know, perfectionist. It's of course you want your work to be as good as possible, but sometimes too much detail does not help. You know, the editors, the reviewers may not see, you know, may not see it as relevant as you may see it. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
I have a question about the title, maybe, like, can you also give some tips how to give a proper title for the paper you write? Because for some title it's quite long, for some title it's quite short, it's quite general. Because I think the title is also super important to attract some readers. So
you know, the recent trend is to so first of all, totally not recommended to have a 3-line title, right? Like so much detail there that you actually start the reader goes, you know, through your title, starts reading, and then by the end they finish reading your title, they forgot where they actually start from. So try to be as short as possible. I see a recent trend of having titles that are quite general and maybe they start with a question, you know. So let's say, again from my field, does olfaction influence attention? Right, and then as a subtitle or a continuation of the title, an EEG-based study. You know, if it's an attention-based study experiment that uses EEG to understand markers of attention and how they are influenced by olfaction or by other stimuli. You know, something like that. So I see more and more papers and that are using this strategy. You know, to make it a bit more flashy, more catchy. Start with a question, then with a brief description of, you know, what follows. Yeah, also avoid very general, like EEG analysis of something, you know. Try to be a bit more specific, but don't go into like 3-line description of this. Basically, you have a second abstract in your title. Any other question? No? Alright, now let's just go a bit over what an editor looks for in your paper, right? And again, this is what I mentioned, my experience from working with the MBEC journal. What are we actually looking for? So the first thing that I'm doing when I'm receiving a paper to screen is our assistants, they're actually running this software that does the plagiarist check, right? So make sure that you are not, softwares nowadays, they are so advanced, they're using artificial intelligence, so they can detect, resemblances, even if you just reword some of the phrases from your previous papers and so on, and say, oh, it's okay. No, actually, the softwares can give this kind of information. So make sure that this is the first thing that we're actually checking, whether there is a high degree of similarity, both in just text and also in ideas and findings compared to other papers. Then, second thing that I'm checking is related to what the question in the previous session was, the scope. Does it really fit our journal? Is it... now in MBEC, as I mentioned also previously, that's not much of a point, but some journals, they are really narrow focused, so they may just reject your, even if it's a great work, they reject your paper because it doesn't suit your their field, Another thing that I'm looking at as an editor is the structure, right? So I want to see, as I mentioned in the introduction, that there is a brief description of the state of the art. There's an identification of the limitations of the state of the art. There's a clear statement of what the novelty is, right? As I said, limited time of the editors. They want to have this information easily accessible. This is usually in specific parts of the paper, right? State of the art is probably starts probably with the second paragraph of your paper. Novelty, hypothesis, brief context at the end of the introduction. So I just go to those parts. Are they there? Okay, if they are there, I just forward the paper. Also, similarly, I checked whether there are no results in the method section or results in the discussion and so on. But again, time is very limited, so I just have like a checklist of that, right? And then finally, I need to give an opinion whether the paper is impactful enough, and that's quite subjective, But we try to be as objective by following the criteria that I just mentioned, whether it is impactful enough for the audience, right? Because the journals, they also want to accept papers, to publish the papers, but they also want to keep a high enough impact factor, So the high enough impact factor is achieved by making sure that the paper is of high quality, right? And it's read by a large number of people. So if the paper is potentially addressing problems in a number of areas, that means it has a higher impact. So make sure that you also transmit this information through. Probably the best place to put that is in the discussion and conclusions. Now again, just to repeat, what is the pipeline here? Because I think not many of you are familiar with how the publication pipeline works. So paper gets submitted by you, right? It reaches the journal office, which scans for, as I mentioned, for plagiarists. It reaches the deputy editors, which scan for novelty, impact, and so on. And from deputy editors, paper is being sent to associate editors, which are closer to your field of work. They are supposed to be experts, and that's where we need to be very careful as deputy editors that we actually assign the papers to people that have a very strong idea about your work. And yes, associated editors forward your papers to the reviewers, right? And then when the reviewers get back with their reports, it's being compiled by the associate editors, which sends it to the editor-in-chief, who issues a decision. I'm not going to this. So this is, kind of an example of how a plagiarist check software checks for text similarity. Now, I see we're running a bit out of time, so I'm just going to go a bit fast over here. So what is a reviewer's perspective? Keep in mind that when a reviewer receives your work, it has a checklist, right? So nowadays, most of the systems of the journals, they have a list of questions that the reviewer needs to ask and probably give a quantitative response, such as yes, no, strongly yes, strongly no, and so on. Right? So does the paper contain sufficiently new material? Is it presented concisely and well organized? Are the methods and experiments presented in detail such that they can be easily replicated, right? So someone that reads your paper, can they actually do the same experiments if they have the means, you know? Are the results presented adequately? Is the discussion relevant, concise, and well documented? And are the conclusions supported by the data present? What about the figures and tables? Are they well designed? Are they presenting enough information and not duplicating on this language, etc.? Of course, language is never a very important. I mean, it's important so that you can communicate well your ideas and your conclusions and your results. But that's never a deal breaker. I mean, we never reject papers just because the English language is not good enough, right? So that's not such a big deal. But just make sure that the language is acceptable so that you can transmit the information in an appropriate manner. Reference is not so important, I would say. All right. So what happens when you get the reviewer's feedback, right? So those of you that published the first reaction when you get the reviewer feedback, probably not the best time of the day, right? It's very rare that the paper gets accepted from the very beginning, and that's also not a good sign for the journal if they accept immediately your paper, right? Because the whole point of the review process is to help you improve your paper, right? Improve the way you present information, or maybe the reviewers may ask for some additional experiments, which comes back to your question, to improve their work. So that's the point of the reviewers, So many times you would perceive, particularly since you are, deeply involved with your work, many times the reviewers' comments, they are offensive, right? So the first point happened many times to me, this guy is an idiot, he doesn't understand what I did. Like, how can you say he didn't read the paper, I had this information there? Well, if they didn't see it, it means that maybe you didn't structure your paper correctly, So don't take it personal, okay? So that's the first point. Don't start writing immediately or working immediately on your paper after reading. Just give it a couple of days to digest, and then go back and, try with a clear mind to address the reviewer's comments objectively. Take time to read through the editor and reviewer's advice carefully, so point by point, and decide what changes you will make to your article, and make sure that every point that the reviewer is making is addressed, right? Because when you resubmit, let's say you get a major revisions decision, right? So you resubmit the paper making changes according to the reviewer's comments, right? So make sure that you address all those comments, right? So point by point, do not make a second paper through responding, so you still need to be concise, don't add paragraphs and paragraphs of descriptions. Instead, just point to the reviewers where in the text you have addressed his comments. Okay? All right. What about the cases when you actually don't agree with reviewers' comments? That's perfectly fine. I mean, they are human also. They may be wrong. They may have actually not seen what you have written there. That can happen. Okay. So just don't ignore these cases. Make sure you address them, because your responses are read both by the associate editors but also the reviewers. So don't ignore it. Make sure that you address them so that they know that you have actually seen it. And then, okay, if you don't agree with that, you need to provide an explanation of why you have not made the changes that they requested. Right? Sometimes the associate, even if the reviewers, they do not accept your responses, if the associate editor accepts your responses, then they may override the decision of the reviewer. So just make sure that you are clear enough in describing in an adequate language your responses. All right, so we're nearing the end now. And they just will give you a few points, common reasons of why your manuscripts may be rejected. First, paper does not match journal's aim or scope. So what would you do in such cases? Make sure that you check the respective section of the paper and find the journal that actually matches your work best. This is quite similar, so lack of adherence to manuscript submission guidelines. Again, this may make sure that you actually, every journal has a guidelines for author section where they actually provide maybe a template of how the paper should be structured and formats and fonts and so on. So make sure you are following that. The assistant editor's office, they are checking for that. Another very important, probably most common thing or reason why the manuscripts are rejected is the lack of novelty or significance or flawed experimental design. So here, of course, this is what you should do before you actually start the paper, right? The thorough review of the literature. But if you get comments that your novelty is not there, you may think it's novel, some others have done it. Just go back to the literature, do some more search, and so on. This is always something really bad if there's the editors find that you don't cite correctly your sources, you duplicate your information from other sources, and so on. Fifth point, unclear or poorly designed figures and tables. So make sure that you follow the style that I mentioned previously. And again, this issues with writing, spelling, grammar. This is not a deal breaker, but it's always much easier for the editors and the reviewers if you have, if you follow, the logical flow. If your language is adequate, so that the people can understand what you are trying to transmit there. And never give up. Okay, so even if you get negative feedback, your paper is rejected. I know how depressing it can be. It happens to everyone. Don't worry. Even to the most experienced professors out there with 100,000 citations, they get rejected sometimes, rarely, but sometimes. So don't give up. Just try to improve your paper by considering, even if we reject, this rejects at the very early level of the editorial process. If we reject the paper, we try to give sufficient feedback to the authors, 2-3 lines, in which you describe why we rejected it, what are the problems. So get those, try to improve your paper using that, and then submit somewhere else. Or submit in the same place if you feel like. Alright, so here I'm just going to skip over this. These are just some resources. I don't know, maybe you can give me some more information here. Are you using any softwares for writing papers? Except for Word or something like that. I find very useful. There are some tools. Of course, some people use the Google Docs where you can write. Always, writing the paper is not an individual enterprise, right? You write as a team. Most of the times you have several people in the team that are co-authors. More of them contribute. So there are softwares nowadays online like Overleaf. I find it really useful, and we're doing that. Particularly, it's useful because it allows you, so it uses a LaTeX format, but it's very easy, very intuitive, and you can actually see in real time the PDF version. So all the journals, they give templates nowadays that are incorporated in Overleaf. So we currently now, in my lab, we're actually using right now Overleaf. It's quite easy, convenient. Several people, so you just log into the website, and several people can access at the same time, and you can write, and you can have a chat here that you can talk. You are at home, your colleagues are at home, you can chat and see what you need to change and so on. It's very easy to use. Also very useful, I just put here some resources on reference management softwares. I don't know, are you using any of these, or are you using others? No? Yeah, so I find this very, all the time I was using Mendeley, but nowadays I'm stuck with the Overleaf. Because it uses you can use the big files, the reference files, and you can just add it there. So it's quite easy. You can use Zotero to download the papers, automatically when you are reading in the journal websites. And so there are plugins to the browsers and so on. All right. So this is the last one. Conclusion: a good paper needs a flow. Make sure that there is a flow in your paper. that ties well your paragraphs, sections. Always seek feedbacks from peers and advisors. That will help you identify if there are any gaps in your paper structure, and do not procrastinate. You know what procrastinate is? Don't do everything at the last moment, okay? This comes from someone that does that, and it's never good. It's always so stressing. I mean, oftentimes there's a deadline for submission next day, and I find myself, still writing on the day before. It never comes out well. So you need to write with a clear mind. Just be relaxed. So don't leave it until the very end. All right. This is again our journal. So any questions? Yes. Let's see.
I have two questions. The first is with the figure size. So, for example, we want a landscape figure or a portrait figure. From the publishing house point of view, what would be the correct ratio? Because sometimes we fit in too much information. For example, I want a flow chart with, like some small ABCD. So what would be the correct, is it like 4:3, the whole PowerPoint slide we can include, or what exactly would be the correct proportion?
Well, I think it depends on the format. So for example, IEEE journals, they have the 2-column format, and it's more difficult to fill in that format large figures, but you can always do this, like have a 2-column figure, so that's fine. Yeah, so like on the landscape. I wouldn't say that that's something that is, can get you in trouble with reviewers or someone. The only guidelines that I would give is don't add too much information. Yeah, so maybe instead of having a very crowded figure with a lot of things that you put in there, separate into figures if possible. Portrait or landscape, I think it only depends if you're restricted by manuscript length, by number of pages. Yeah, that may be important. But otherwise, about figures, my main advice would be to do not overcrowd them and just add, enough information that can have the reader understand what you actually try to show them.
Okay. And another question is for the plagiarism software. Does it already detect ChatGPT, or if yes, then?
No. Definitely not. But there are a lot of discussions, ChatGPT and other AI softwares that are being used. Some journals, they are even discussing whether ChatGPT should be added as co-author. That's a longer discussion, though. Yeah.
So it's clearly no problem.
I see some of the journals right now, they actually want authors to add a disclaimer, or they have questions where the discussion with the attendance member from previous session, whether they are being asked whether you have used ChatGPT or not, So I see the increasing trend that journals ask whether you have used it or not. So you may add that, many journals have this author's contribution. What author contributed with what? So that's where you should mention ChatGPT. We can discuss more afterwards, yeah? Yes.
I also got two questions. And the first, by recent statistics, I have read an article, and the author affirms that more than 90% of scientific articles all around the world are just useless, and there is no difference with them or without them. And what do you think about this statement? And the second question is about the fake journals, and how do you think it should be controlled, all these attacks every day on the scientists' emails, and how the penalty should make for them? Thank you.
Well, okay, I'll start first with your first question. Let's see that. I should follow the advice that I gave, right? Logical. So the first question was about the journals, right? Yeah, from journals. Yeah, so as I said, there's an incredible number of journals nowadays. So just make sure that, you know, you check very well the history of that journal, whether you check very well that they have a very well described reviewing process. They have a well described editorial board, people that you actually appreciate, they are present there, you know, some experts. What was the last? What was the other question?
A little bit about the statement of use.
Useless. Okay, I should have said that much. Yeah, so unfortunately, yeah, we see right now also in our journal a large number of submissions that are just frankly junk, you know. And I see many, like a lot of rejected, let's reject many of those papers that actually claim much more than they're actually doing. So for just an example, I've seen papers that they provide an AI and IoT, you know, just use catchy term, AI and IoT framework for analyzing I don't know what. And in fact, what they are doing is that they're just taking public databases, you know, and they're running some classifier. And they say that, oh, because this data can be collected by Internet of Things devices, you know, then I should just put that into the title and in the abstract maybe to make people, you know, think that I'm doing something state-of-the-art and so on, and then type it. So, unfortunately, a lot of papers are doing just this overstatement, you know, claiming that they're doing much more than others. I would say that's where the main problem lies right now. Another thing is that another reason why we're rejecting a large number of papers is that it's just incremental improvement, right? So you're doing some classification and then public data set classification, let's say, and then you're saying that, oh, the novelty is that I'm just adding something like an optimization technique, like genetic algorithm or something like that. You know? That's a very minor thing. I mean, what does it bring you, right? At least, or you can still, you're doing that, okay, you're following a methodology that's already been developed, but at least your results should add, you know, to the common knowledge, your interpretation, but don't just throw the results over there. So, you know, just this incremental, you're just you're just tweaking some parameters of the classifiers to improve 1% the classification accuracy, that's not normal. So, I mean, we are, and this is part of our check, you know, so we're checking that and we're making sure that there is, or we're trying to make sure that there is a significant download. We can discuss more if there's some other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is about your opinion. How do you see the future of the open access and subscription access journals in the future? Because now we are in the process.
Yeah.
Where it will end up? Where will be the quality journals and the others?
Yeah.
Subscription or paid?
This is actually a very good question. Here I will speak not as a representative of IFMBE, of the journal, but as a scientist. And me personally, I believe that science should be open access. You know, if you're putting something behind the paywall, that means that someone is trying to make money out of your work. You know? So I do believe and I do hope that in the future open access will be prevalent. Everyone will have access to publications. How will that work? That's another question. I mean, how will the journals, because the journals need to earn some money, right? I mean, or at least to make the money that they cost to produce. So, and that's a big point of discussion currently. There are already journals that are following this. You know, there's a discussion of eLife and other new publication approaches. I see, and I believe that this is one way to do it, is to have the review process public, because in that way, for us it's very difficult to find reviewers because reviewers are by nature anonymous, right? So how will you convince someone to actually review a paper without any benefit to them? So right now, journals are trying to reward reviewers by making public, if not their names, but at least the fact that they have reviewed. So this gets added to your, for example, Web of Science profile. So you can get, besides the number of citations of the respective researcher, also the number of reviews. So in the future, you know, someone that is providing consistent feedback would be, that would be added to this researcher profile. I see, and I think this is a good step, that this also open reviewers process, right? So you see the reviewers, once the paper is published, of course. So the name of the reviewers are out there because they get credited, and they also are being judged by the work that they are doing as reviewers, right? Whether they improve the papers or not. So not only their names, but also their comments. So eLife, for example, you've probably heard of that journal, eLife?
Nature, I saw in Nature.
Nature, yes, some Nature papers are doing that. So publish the comments of the reviewers and their names. I think that's one way. Now regarding the revenue, how can the journals sustain themselves by making everything open access? That's a big discussion. Which, well, hopefully...
Ultimately, the question is about funding, I think, of the business.
Yeah. Any other question?
Referitor la metodele statistice, din perspectiva autorului care publică revista și din perspectiva cititorului, cum să știm dacă, în genere, redacția revistelor verifică cât de corect s-au făcut metodele statistice, cât de corect s-au calculat, au fost folosite corect, distribuția a fost normală. Ca autor, este necesar de a păstra datele statistice, ele vor fi cerute de revistă și ca cititor se poate de verifica dacă am unele dubii cât de corect aplicate metodele statistice.
Yeah, so that's in English. So again, this is a matter of the standards that the journal imposes. So we are trying, and it also depends on the fields, but most of the fields nowadays they are trying to impose that all the details of statistical analysis are there in the results, or maybe in the supplementary methods. Once you publish all the details of the statistical analysis, that makes sure that that specific analysis is replicable, right? Everyone can repeat it if you are providing the data. Now, the journal cannot ask you to actually provide the data. In some cases, that is proprietary. Some journals, they actually encourage authors to share their code, right? So I see a lot of papers, but that's more prevalent in areas like neuroscience, psychology, where they are heavily involved in statistics. I see over there that actually it's a trend that you share your code. There are now platforms such as GitHub, for example, where you can actually publish, and that's always very well viewed by reviewers and editors. If you are willing to share your code and your methodology, that's already a sign that you have done things thoroughly, So it's a matter of, I would say, self-regulation rather than standards imposed by the journal, because as I said, you cannot really impose for the authors to share the data so that people try that. But some journals do that. There are some journals that are focused on actually experimental procedures. So they actually ask you to provide open access to your code, or if you're developing software tools, to make them usable and tested by the reviewers and also used by the authors. So there is a trend in this direction as well, but not in all areas. Any other question?
Yeah, I want to ask actually, when you make a decision on a paper as an editor, how much percent your decision will rely on the reviewer's comment or reviewer's recommendation? Because sometimes actually, it can happen it's obvious that the reviewer didn't understand the work of this paper, but still get rejected by the editor.
So, that's also a matter of how experienced the editor is, and by participating in conferences, by publishing over a long time, you actually form a network, right? So when me as an editor, I send a paper for review, I tend to send to people that I know, that I trust. Of course, sometimes they are not available, they're recommending others, and so it's a matter of how much the editor trusts the reviewers. They know that they are exactly targeting that specific area of the paper. So it's basically there. If the editor trusts the reviewer, then it's more likely that they will give, you know, full credit. I mean, they will totally believe the reviewers, you know. But again, this comes with experience. This comes with good practices of the editors and reviewers also. You know. Yeah. Also, for editors, there are several layers. So there are the associate editors that first screen the reports of the reviewers, and then there's the deputy editor or the editor-in-chief that actually issues the final decision. So if there still is a chance that the associate editor does not trust the reviewers or trust too much the reviewers, this will be overruled. It happens rarely. So I would say most of the times it's the reviewers have quite a large, important say. But sometimes that can be overruled. I cannot really give percentages, depends on the journal, you know. Yeah. Any other question? No? All right.